The moment I locked eyes with Ryan Caldwell across the crowded ballroom at the Pinnacle Marketing Holiday Gala, I told myself he was just my colleague Sarah's cold, unapproachable fiancé, the kind of straight guy who barely acknowledged anyone outside his circle. But something in the way his gaze held mine for a second too long made my chest tighten, and I knew right then I couldn't look away no matter how hard I tried. The downtown Chicago Hilton sparkled with thousands of white lights and the low hum of jazz music, but all I could focus on was the tall man in the tailored charcoal suit standing beside Sarah, his hand resting lightly on her waist like it belonged there. She waved me over with her usual bright smile, her blonde hair catching the light as she called out, "Alex, come meet Ryan. He's been dying to hear about that campaign you crushed last quarter." I forced a grin and weaved through the sea of co-workers in their festive attire, my dress shoes clicking against the marble floor. At 28, I'd built a pretty solid life here in the city. A decent apartment in Lincoln Park, a job I actually liked as a senior graphic designer, and a small circle of friends who didn't ask too many questions about my personal life. I learned the hard way after coming out to my conservative extended family back in Ohio that some truths were better kept quiet, especially at work. Sarah was the exception, my closest friend at the firm, always there with coffee and laughs during late nights. Seeing her happy should have been enough. Ryan extended his hand first. His grip was firm, warm in a way that sent an unexpected spark up my arm. "Alex Rivera, right? Sarah talks about you nonstop. Sounds like you're the creative genius keeping this place afloat." His voice was deep, measured, with just a hint of a Midwest accent that made him sound both professional and approachable. Up close, he was even more striking, with sharp jawline, dark hair neatly styled, and those blue eyes that seemed to see straight through the polite mask I wore. I laughed it off, mumbling something about Sarah exaggerating, but my pulse was racing. He was exactly the type I usually avoided, successful, put together, and very much taken by a woman I cared about deeply. The night blurred after that. We chatted in small groups about the firm's latest client wins, the brutal Chicago winter coming, and Ryan's work as a corporate lawyer at a big downtown firm. He smiled at all the right moments, but there was a cool distance in his posture, like he was observing everything from behind a glass wall. Sarah beamed beside him, squeezing his arm and telling stories about their recent trip to Michigan. I nodded along, laughing when expected, but every time Ryan glanced my way, that same pull tugged at me. By the time the party wound down and people started collecting coats, I slipped out onto the terrace for air, the city lights stretching below like a glittering promise. Footsteps approached. Ryan stepped out, loosening his ties slightly, the cold wind ruffling his hair. "Mind if I join you?" Sarah's inside, saying goodbyes. He leaned on the railing beside me, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne, something clean and woody. "She thinks the world of you, you know? Says you're the only one who gets her crazy ideas." We talked easily then about nothing and everything, the kind of conversation that felt effortless despite the alarm bells in my head. When he mentioned growing up in a small town outside the city with parents who expected certain things, his tone softened just a fraction. I didn't push. I couldn't. By the time Sarah joined us, laughing and linking her arm through his, I had already made a silent vow to bury whatever this was. Ryan Caldwell was off-limits, straight, engaged, and the last person who should make me question the careful boundaries I'd built. Yet as I watched them leave, his hand on her back, guiding her through the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that one glance had cracked something open inside me I wasn't sure I could close again. The drive home through the snowy streets felt longer than usual, my mind replaying every word, every look, wondering why a man I barely knew had suddenly become impossible to ignore. The next week at the office dragged with the usual post-holiday slump. Sarah bounced into my cubicle on Monday morning with 2 lattes, her engagement ring catching the fluorescent light. "Ryan really liked you, Alex. He said you were easy to talk to, which is huge for him. He's usually so reserved around new people." I took the coffee with a thanks, forcing a smile while my stomach twisted. Reserved. That was one word for it. I buried myself in deadlines for a new tech client campaign, sketching logos and color palettes until my eyes burned. But every time my phone buzzed with a group text including Ryan or When Sarah mentioned him casually over lunch, the memory of that terrace conversation resurfaced. He had asked about my design process with genuine interest, not the polite small talk most people offered. It was dangerous, this curiosity blooming where it had no right to be. By Friday, the firm announced a cross-department project that paired marketing with external legal consultants for a high-profile merger. My heart dropped when Sarah forwarded the email. Ryan's firm was handling the legal side, and he'd be sitting in on our strategy sessions. "Isn't this perfect?" she texted. "You two can bond over work now." Perfect wasn't the word I'd choose. I spent the weekend pacing my apartment, reminding myself of every reason this attraction was wrong. Sarah's trust, my job stability, the life I'd carefully constructed to avoid exactly this kind of complication. But when Monday rolled around and Ryan walked into the conference room in a crisp navy suit, offering me a professional nod and that same steady gaze, I knew the battle was already lost. The meeting dragged on with slides and timelines, but all I registered was the way he listened intently, occasionally glancing my way as if checking if I was still there. After it ended, he lingered by the door. "Good ideas in there, Alex. We should grab coffee sometime to go over the branding angles." His tone was casual, but the invitation hung between us like a live wire. I agreed before I could stop myself, watching him walk away with Sarah waiting in the hall. That night, alone with a reheated dinner and the city lights flickering outside my window, I stared at my reflection and admitted the truth I'd been dodging. Ryan Caldwell wasn't just Sarah's cold fiancé anymore. He was the man I couldn't stop thinking about, and that realization terrified me more than any deadline ever had. The weeks ahead would test everything I thought I knew about loyalty, desire, and who I really was beneath the surface. The first coffee meeting with Ryan happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in a quiet cafe near the Riverwalk, the kind of place where the baristas knew everyone's order and the windows fogged up from steam. I arrived early, telling myself it was purely professional, just two guys discussing fonts and legal disclaimers for the campaign. When Ryan walked in, shaking rain from his coat, his smile was brief but real, cutting through the gray day like sunlight. "Thanks for making time," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. We dove into work immediately, spreading mock-ups on the table, but the conversation drifted naturally, the way it had on the terrace. He asked about my family back in Ohio, and I gave the edited version, the one that left out the awkward Thanksgiving where my uncle had made it clear my lifestyle wasn't welcome at the table. Ryan listened without judgment, nodding slowly. "Families can be complicated," he said quietly. "Mine expects the whole package: house, wife, kids. Sometimes it feels like I'm living someone else's script." The words hung there, heavier than the rain outside. I wanted to ask what he meant, but Sarah's face flashed in my mind, and I changed the subject to the client deadlines instead. Still, something shifted in that hour. Ryan wasn't cold at all once the walls came down. He was thoughtful, funny in a dry way that made me laugh harder than I had in months. When we parted ways under a shared umbrella, his hand brushed mine accidentally, and neither of us pulled away immediately. The contact lingered like a question neither of us voiced. Back at the office, Sarah greeted me with a hug. "How was it? Ryan said you nailed the concepts." I smiled and said it went great, but inside, guilt gnawed at me. She was planning their wedding for next spring, picking venues and colors, while I replayed Ryan's words about family expectations on loop. The project intensified over the following weeks, forcing more meetings. Late nights in the conference room became routine, just the two of us after everyone else had gone home. Ryan loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and we bounced ideas until the city outside grew quiet. One Thursday, as snow began falling softly against the windows, he set down his laptop and looked at me directly. "You ever feel like you're wearing a mask all the time, Alex? Like everyone's seeing the version of you they want, not the real one?" His voice was low, vulnerable in a way that made my breath catch. I hesitated, then nodded. "Every day. It's exhausting." We didn't say more, but the air between us thickened with unspoken understanding. When I got home that night, I paced my living room, staring at photos of Sarah and me from team retreats. She had been my rock through tough projects and even tougher personal moments. Betraying her trust felt impossible, yet denying the growing pull toward Ryan felt even worse. Sarah noticed the change first, though she misread it. Over lunch in the break room, she teased, "You and Ryan are becoming best buds. It's cute. He even asked about your favorite coffee order yesterday." I laughed it off, but the comment twisted the knife. That weekend, she invited me to dinner at their apartment in the Gold Coast, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling views of the lake. Ryan cooked pasta, moving around the kitchen with surprising ease, while Sarah poured wine and chattered about wedding plans. I watched them together, the easy rhythm of their movements, and felt like an intruder. Yet when Ryan passed me the salad bowl, his fingers grazed mine again, deliberate this time, and our eyes met. The spark was undeniable. Later, as I helped clear the table, he murmured in the kitchen, "I'm glad you're here, Alex." Really, the words were simple, but they carried weight. Driving home, through the empty streets, the snow swirling in my headlights, I realized the lines were blurring faster than I could redraw them. Work pressures mounted as the merger deadline approached. One evening, after a particularly grueling presentation, Ryan and I stayed behind to finalize designs. The office was empty, the only light coming from our screens. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "My parents called today. They want to meet Sarah's family soon. Push the wedding date up." His tone was flat, almost resigned. I asked why the rush, and he sighed, staring at the ceiling. "They have this idea of what my life should look like. Successful lawyer, stable marriage, the whole package. Anything less isn't an option in their world." I wanted to tell him he didn't have to live that way, but the words stuck. Instead, I shared a piece of my own story, the way my father had stopped calling after I came out in college. Ryan listened, really listened, and for the first time, I felt seen without judgment. When we finally packed up and headed to the elevator, the silence was comfortable, charged. Outside in the cold, he turned to me before we parted. "Thanks for tonight. I don't talk like this with many people." His hand squeezed my shoulder briefly, then he was gone into the night. The next day, Sarah pulled me aside in the hallway, her expression concerned. "Ryan seems distracted lately. Is everything okay with the project?" I reassured her it was fine, but inside, the guilt grew heavier. Each interaction with Ryan chipped away at my resolve, forcing me to confront the parts of myself I'd kept locked away. The attraction wasn't just physical. It was the way he made me feel alive, understood in ways no one else had. Yet every laugh we shared, every lingering look, carried the weight of potential heartbreak for Sarah, for all of us. As February brought more snow and longer nights, I wonder how long I could keep pretending this was just a work friendship. The truth was pressing closer, demanding to be acknowledged, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to keep looking away anymore. Spring arrived in Chicago with sudden warmth that melted the last patches of snow, but the thaw inside me was far more dangerous. Ryan and I had fallen into a routine of late-night work sessions that stretched beyond the project needs, our conversations drifting from campaign strategies to deeper territories neither of us had planned to explore. One evening in early April, after the team had cleared out, he closed his laptop and turned to me with a seriousness that made my stomach drop. "Alex, there's something I need to tell you. The engagement with Sarah, it's not what it seems." The words landed like a stone in still water. He explained in a quiet voice how his parents' expectations had pushed him into the relationship as a way to maintain appearances, how Sarah knew parts of the truth, but not all of it. She thought it was real love at first, but over time it had become a comfortable arrangement for both, a shield against the world. I sat frozen, processing. "Does she know you're—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Ryan met my eyes steadily. "Bye. Yeah, and right now. The person I can't stop thinking about isn't her." The admission hung between us, raw and electric. My heart hammered as he continued, describing how our conversations had cracked open the careful life he'd built, how my presence made him question everything. We didn't touch, didn't cross any lines that night, but the air crackled with possibility. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring through tears I refused to shed. Sarah was my friend. Ryan was hers. Yet the connection between us felt inevitable, like gravity pulling two objects that had been orbiting too close for too long. The following weeks tested every boundary. We met in hidden corners of the city, coffee shops in Wicker Park where no one knew us, walking along the lakefront at dusk where the wind off the water carried away our words. Ryan opened up about the pressure from his family, the Sunday dinners where questions about grandchildren came like clockwork. I shared my own scars, the way I dated women in college to fit in before finally accepting who I was. Our talks were honest, sometimes painful, but always laced with a growing affection that scared me. One rainy afternoon in a bookstore cafe, Ryan reached across the table and brushed his thumb over my knuckles. I don't want to hurt anyone, Alex, but pretending anymore feels like dying slowly. The touch was brief, but it burned. Sarah started sensing the shift. She cornered me in the copy room one afternoon. Her usual cheer dimmed. You've been distant, Alex. And Ryan. He's been different too. Is the project stressing you both out? I lied smoothly, blaming deadlines, but the guilt ate at me. That weekend, she invited us both to a Cubs game, the three of us in the stand with hot dogs and beer. Ryan sat between us, his knee pressing against mine under the seats, a secret signal that sent my pulse racing. Sarah cheered for every play, oblivious, while I fought the urge to lean into the contact. Afterward, as we walked to the parking lot, Ryan lingered by my car while Sarah took a call. This is getting harder to hide, he murmured. I think about you all the time. His honesty both thrilled and terrified me. The project wrapped successfully in late May, earning us praise from the partners. At the celebratory happy hour downtown, Sarah raised a toast to our dream team. Ryan's eyes found mine across the table, full of unspoken promises. Later, walking back through the loop, he pulled me into a quiet alley between buildings. The kiss was tentative at first, then deeper, years of suppressed longing pouring out. We broke apart breathless, foreheads touching. I can't do this to Sarah, I whispered. Ryan nodded, pain etching his features. I know, but I can't keep living a lie either. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and mounting tension. We talked late into the nights on the phone, Ryan in his apartment, me in mine, mapping out the impossible path forward. His parents announced a family gathering to celebrate the engagement, adding pressure that made him withdraw at times. I threw myself into new designs at work, but every notification from him lit me up and tore me down simultaneously. One humid June evening, Sarah showed up my door unannounced, eyes red from crying. Ryan wants to talk. He says things have changed. Do you know what's going on? Her vulnerability hit me like a wave. I invited her in, made tea, and listened as she poured out her fears. Part of me wanted to confess everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I held her while she cried, hating myself for the role I was playing. When she left, I called Ryan, voice shaking. We have to stop. This is destroying us all. His silence on the other end was heavy. I can't stop, Alex. Not when being with you feels like the first real thing in my life. The call ended without resolution, leaving me staring at the ceiling until dawn. The summer heat rose in Chicago, mirroring the turmoil inside. Every choice now carried consequences that rippled through friendships, careers, and families. I had thought Ryan was just the cold fiancé I needed to ignore. Instead, he had become the mirror forcing me to see my own truths, and the reflection was both beautiful and terrifying. July brought record heat to Chicago, turning the streets into shimmering mirages and forcing everyone indoors with air conditioning. Ryan and I tried to create space, agreeing to limit contact to work emails only, but the pull proved stronger than willpower. A text from him at midnight about a new case he was handling turned into hours of conversation, voices low to avoid waking neighbors. My parents keep asking about the wedding, he confessed one night. They want to book the church. I feel like I'm suffocating. I listened, offering what comfort I could, but the guilt over Sarah grew heavier with each passing day. She had started planning bridal showers and asking my opinion on dresses, completely unaware that the man she loved was confiding his deepest fears in me. The breaking point came during a company retreat at a lakeside resort outside the city. The firm rented cabins for team building, and Sarah insisted Ryan join as her guest. The three of us ended up sharing meals and activities, the tension thick enough to cut. During a sunset hike, Sarah twisted her ankle on a root, forcing Ryan and me to help her back. In the quiet of the trail, with her leaning on both of us, Ryan's hand found mine behind her back for a brief, desperate squeeze. Later that evening, while Sarah rested in the cabin, Ryan and I sat on the dock, feet dangling over the dark water. "I can't marry her, Alex," he said, voice breaking for the first time. "Not when every part of me wants to be with you." The confession hung in the humid air, crickets chirping around us. I wanted to pull him close, to tell him we could figure it out, but the image of Sarah's trusting smile stopped me. Back in the city, Ryan made the call that changed everything. He met Sarah for lunch at her favorite cafe and told her the truth, not all of it, but enough to break the engagement gently. She came to my apartment afterward, devastated but composed. He said he's not in love the way he should be, that he needs time to figure himself out. I held her as she cried, my own tears silent. The betrayal sat like lead in my stomach. Work became a minefield of awkward silences and sideways glances from colleagues who sensed the shift. Sarah threw herself into projects with fierce determination, avoiding me when possible. Ryan texted me late that night. "I did it. For us. But it hurts like hell." His family reacted with fury. His father called him a disappointment, threatening to cut him off from the family business connections that had helped his career. Ryan showed up at my door one stormy evening, soaked and exhausted, carrying a duffel bag. "I couldn't stay there anymore. Can I crash on your couch?" I let him in without hesitation, making coffee while he changed into dry clothes. We talked until sunrise, his head eventually resting on my shoulder as exhaustion took over. In the quiet moments, I realized this was more than attraction. Ryan had become the person who saw all of me, the good and the scared parts, and loved me anyway. But the cost was mounting. Sarah stopped speaking to me at the office, her hurt turning into cold professionalism that cut deeper than anger. Colleagues whispered about the broken engagement, some speculating about Ryan's sudden distance. August brought small steps forward. Ryan found a temporary apartment nearby, and we began navigating a relationship in secret, stolen dinners at quiet restaurants, walks in Millennium Park when the crowds thinned. Each moment felt stolen, precious but shadowed by the pain we'd caused. One weekend, we drove to the Indiana dunes for a day, away from everything, the lake breeze carrying away some of the weight. Ryan took my hand openly on the beach, the sun warming our skin. "This feels right," he said simply. For the first time, I believe it could be. Yet back in Chicago, reality intruded. Sarah confronted me in the parking garage after work one Friday. "Was it you? All along?" Her voice trembled with betrayal. I couldn't lie anymore. It started before I could stop it. "I'm so sorry." She walked away without another word, leaving me standing there with the echo of her pain. The internal battle raged on. Nights when Ryan stayed over, we talked about coming out fully, about building a life together without hiding. But the fear of losing my job, of facing judgment from clients and friends, kept me awake. Ryan struggled too, fielding angry calls from his mother who couldn't understand why he had thrown away a perfect future. Through it all, our bond deepened. He encouraged me to reconnect with my own family on my terms, and I helped him find a therapist to process the family rejection. The growth was painful but real, each of us becoming stronger versions of ourselves. By late summer, as the leaves began turning, I knew the hiding had to end. Ryan was no longer the cold fiancé I had misjudged. He was the man who had awakened every part of me, and together we were learning that love demanded honesty, even when it hurt the people we cared about most. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. Fall painted Chicago in shades of amber and crimson, and with the changing seasons came the courage to face what we'd been avoiding. Ryan and I decided it was time to stop hiding. The first step was telling the team at work in a quiet meeting with our manager. The reaction was mixed, some surprised nods, a few awkward silences, but no outright hostility. Sarah requested a transfer to another department shortly after, her pain still raw but her professionalism intact. Watching her pack her desk tore at me, but Ryan reminded me gently that healing took time for everyone. We didn't set out to hurt her, he said one evening over takeout in my apartment, but we owed her the truth. His words helped, though the guilt lingered like a shadow. Ryan's family situation escalated when his parents flew in for an unplanned visit. We met them at a neutral restaurant downtown, the tension thick from the moment we sat down. His father, a stern man in his 60s, stared at me across the table like I was the reason his son's life had derailed. "This isn't the path we raised you for," he said flatly. Ryan held my hand under the table, his grip steady. "This is who I am, Dad. Alex is part of that." The conversation was painful, full of accusations and tears from his mother. But Ryan stood firm, explaining his journey with a calm I admired. They left without hugs, promising to think about it, but the rift was clear. That night, Ryan broke down in my arms for the first time, the weight of years of expectations finally cracking. I held him through it, whispering that he was enough exactly as he was. The experience bonded us deeper, turning our relationship from secret passion into a partnership built on mutual support. Work life stabilized surprisingly well. Clients cared more about results than personal lives, and several colleagues even reached out with quiet support. I started volunteering at a local LGBTQ youth center on weekends, sharing my story of late acceptance and watching young people find their voices. Ryan joined me sometimes, his legal background helping with workshops on rights and protections. These experiences healed parts of us we didn't know were broken. One crisp October afternoon, we attended a Pride event in Boys Town, walking hand in hand among the crowds for the first time publicly. The joy on Ryan's face as he laughed at the floats was worth every difficult conversation. "I never thought I'd have this," he said, pulling me close amid the cheers. Challenges persisted, of course. Sarah's absence left a hole in our friend group, and occasional awkward run-ins at industry events reminded us of the cost. My own family back in Ohio reacted with cautious acceptance when I finally called home with the news. My mom cried happy tears, promising to visit soon, while my dad stayed quiet but didn't hang up. Small victories accumulated. Ryan proposed one quiet evening in November, not with a ring, but with a simple promise during a walk along the Riverwalk. "I want to build a life with you, Alex. No more hiding, no more pretending." I said yes through tears, the city lights reflecting in the water like stars we had finally reached. The holidays tested us again. Ryan's parents invited us for Thanksgiving, a tentative olive branch. The dinner was stiff at first, but by dessert, conversations flowed more naturally. His mother even asked about my design work, a small step toward understanding. Back in Chicago, we decorated my apartment together, laughing over tangled lights and choosing an ornament that symbolized our first year. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on the man I had once dismissed as cold and distant. Ryan had become my anchor, my joy, the person who taught me that true strength came from vulnerability. Our love had forced growth in every area, from mending family ties to standing taller at work. The sacrifices had been real, the misunderstandings painful, but the awakening was profound. I was no longer the man who hid parts of himself. With Ryan by my side, I was finally free. Winter returned to Chicago with its familiar bite, but this year the cold felt different, softer somehow, with Ryan's presence warming every corner of my life. We moved into a larger apartment together in early December, the process filled with laughter over furniture arrangements and debates about paint colors. The space quickly became ours, filled with my design sketches on the walls and his law books stacked neatly on shelves. Morning started with coffee on the balcony overlooking the snowy skyline, quiet conversations about the day ahead. Ryan had started his own small practice focusing on LGBTQ rights cases, a decision that brought him peace after leaving the corporate world. "It feels like I'm finally using my skills for something that matters," he told me one morning, snowflakes drifting past the window. I watched him with pride, seeing the man who had once seemed untouchable now fully himself. The year ended with a small gathering of close friends who had supported us through the turbulence. Sarah even sent a card, a simple note wishing us well that brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't full reconciliation yet, but it was a beginning. On New Year's Eve, we stood on the roof of our building watching fireworks explode over the lake, Ryan's arms around me as the city celebrated below. To new beginnings, he whispered, kissing me softly. The moment crystallized everything we had fought for, the misunderstandings that had nearly broken us, the betrayals we had owned, the sacrifices that had reshaped our worlds. We had chosen each other not despite the pain, but because the love we shared was worth every difficult step. Looking back now, as another spring approaches and the city blooms again, I see how one unexpected glance at a company party set off a chain of events that transformed two lives. Ryan and I continue growing, supporting each other through family visits that grow warmer over time and work successes that feel earned. The journey taught us that identity isn't something to hide, but to celebrate, that relationships require honesty even when it's hard, and that true connection can heal what society tries to break. Our story isn't perfect, but it's ours, built on courage and compassion in a world that doesn't always understand. As we walk hand in hand through the parks where our love first bloomed openly, I know we've become the man we were always meant to be. The cold fiancé I once misjudged became the love I couldn't look away from, and together we've created something beautiful from the chaos. Life in Chicago continues with its rhythm of seasons and challenges, but now every day feels like a choice we're proud to make. True or false? True love between two men is always worth risking friendships, family ties, and professional stability?